Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. American Pickers stars connect after Fritz's death. American Pickers just returned to the History Channel, and it was the first time it aired since Fritz died. The former co-host died over a year after suffering a stroke. He had been fired from the show before that after recovering from back surgery. Now that he has passed on, Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby have exchanged a sweet back and forth about Frank and their thoughts on each other. American Pickers moving on after Fritz's death. Fritz has not been on American Pickers for a few seasons. However, with the new season coming up, fans might take that idea even harder since he died. While the season was filmed before Frank's death, Mike has said the series will be dedicated in Frank's honor from here on. After this, co-host Danielle Colby responded to Mike by saying, "I love you, brother," with Mike responding, "Love you more, honey," via Newsweek. This also comes after Frank's official cause of death was released. The cause of death is officially late sequela of cerebral infarction, or a stroke that resulted from cerebral vascular disease. Frank was 60. Mike Wolfe claims he wanted Fritz back on American Pickers. After Fritz's death, Mike Wolfe is now saying that he wanted Frank back on American Pickers. Most of the news surrounding Frank leaving the show indicated that Mike had a hand in firing Frank. The two didn't speak for well over a year after Frank's back surgery. It took the stroke to bring them back together again. However, Mike is saying the plan was to get Frank back on the show if his health improved. The timing of this and Frank's passing is not great. However, we have been making shows without Frank for 4 years now, and we have always wanted him to be back with this crew, but he couldn't due to health issues, Mike wrote in an Instagram post. Mike went on to say that they went to see Frank every time they were in Iowa after the stroke to let him know they missed him, and he would never be replaced. As always, since Frank has left, I dedicate this show and all the others this season in his honor, Mike wrote. American Pickers return to the History Channel with a new season on Wednesday, October 9. Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby are joined by Jersey John and Robbie Wolfe. The American Pickers team has always felt more like a family than a simple cast of treasure hunters. When Fritz, one of the original stars and a beloved figure on the show, passed away, the news was a shockwave that reverberated through this tight-knit community and their legion of fans. For Mike Wolfe, the show's charismatic frontman, it wasn't just the loss of a former colleague. It was the loss of a lifelong friend, someone he had shared countless miles and memories with as they scoured the country's forgotten barns, attics, and garages in search of hidden history. In the days following Frank's passing, Mike and the other members of the American Pickers family took time to mourn and remember. Mike, who had known Frank since they were kids growing up in Davenport, Iowa, shared memories of their early days together, how they were two boys with a love for the past, a knack for finding rusty gold, and a dream to make a living out of it. Frank was always the first to crack a joke, Mike shared in an emotional social media post. No matter where we were or how grimy things got, he'd find a way to make us all laugh. That's something I'll carry with me always. Mike's tribute ignited a wave of nostalgia and gratitude from fans. Across social media, thousands poured out memories of watching the two best friends in their heyday, trekking across America in search of unique treasures and unraveling the stories of objects and people alike. To so many, they weren't just pickers, they were cultural archivists, preserving pieces of the past that might have otherwise disappeared. In Frank, fans saw a man who genuinely cared about people and their stories, and that perhaps is what made him resonate so deeply with viewers. As Mike and the American Pickers crew began connecting with fans, stories surfaced from people who had been lucky enough to meet Frank. A woman from Kentucky shared how Frank had stopped at her grandmother's estate sale, bought a vintage radio, and spent hours listening to her grandmother's stories about growing up in the 40s. Others shared similar anecdotes, emphasizing that Frank never seemed to be in a rush. He made time for everyone, often going above and beyond just to hear someone's story. This genuine curiosity for people was a big part of Frank's charm, and what made him a fan favorite for so many years. Meanwhile, Danielle Colby, another central figure on American Pickers, took to Instagram to share her memories of Frank. The two had developed a close friendship over the years, bonded by their shared love of history and unique personalities. Frank wasn't just a friend, he was family. Danielle wrote, posting a picture of them on one of their earliest picking trips together. It's hard to put into words how much he meant to all of us. Frank taught me to see the beauty in things others might overlook, whether that was a piece of Americana or a person with a story to tell. He's left a void in our lives that no one else can fill. The community of pickers across the country, too, was impacted. Many local pickers, who had crossed paths with Frank and Mike over the years, took time to remember Frank's kindness and generosity. To them, Frank wasn't just a TV star, he was one of them, someone who understood the thrill of the find, the joy of saving a piece of history, and the excitement of preserving the stories that went with it. A fellow picker from Iowa named Joe Peters recalled an encounter with Frank at a swap meet years ago. He didn't just talk about the object he was interested in, he wanted to know my story too, Joe said. I think that's what made him special. Frank made everyone feel like they were part of his journey, even if it was just for a moment. Mike and Danielle decided to host a small memorial gathering to celebrate Frank's life, inviting a handful of people from the American Pickers crew and local community who had known him well. It wasn't a grand event, but an intimate one, held in a rustic barn filled with antiques and artifacts, just the sort of setting Frank would have loved. As the evening unfolded, people shared stories, some poignant and others funny, about their time with Frank. There was laughter and tears, and a sense of closure in knowing that he was remembered by so many, with such warmth and fondness. In the wake of Frank's passing, Mike announced plans to honor his friend's memory by setting up a fund to support historical preservation initiatives across the Midwest, a cause close to Frank's heart. Frank believed in the importance of preserving our past, Mike shared. We can think of no better way to honor his memory than by helping save pieces of history for future generations. The fund became a rallying point for fans of the show, who began contributing and sharing their own stories of heirlooms, collections, and family history that had been inspired by watching American Pickers. As donations poured in, Mike was reminded of the deep connection that the show, and Frank himself, had forged with viewers across the world. Ultimately, Frank's passing reminded everyone just how impactful he had been, both on screen and off. Though he and Mike had their differences in later years, the love and respect they shared had always been present, and his absence left a void in both the show and the lives of those who knew him. For Mike, Danielle, and everyone who had known and loved Frank, the journey of healing would continue, but they found solace in knowing that Frank's legacy would live on. Every time they uncovered a forgotten piece of history, every time they connected with a stranger over an object's story, they would feel Frank's spirit there with them. As Mike wrapped up his tribute, he shared one final message to fans. Hold onto your friends and the stories that bring you together. That's what Frank did, and I think he was onto something. With that, the American Pickers crew took a moment to reflect and remember, then continued on their journey, their hearts a little heavier, but their purpose clearer than ever.